Hi everyone, welcome to Module 5. So let's do a quick recap of the last couple of modules that we've taken you through. You've learned about the concept of blisscipline and how one of the ultimate disciplines of being human is to put yourself in a state of bliss, because bliss or happiness unleashes so many other abilities in you as a human being, from productivity to the ability to just get more done and maximize everything that it is that you do. But when you put yourself in bliss and you add that other special ingredient, which is a vision for the future that creates a different state of being, which is what we call the state of flow. And as I mentioned in our last training, which was in the state of flow, that was module 5, that was module 4. I said that when you're in the state of flow, it often sometimes seems as if the universe has your back. And it feels as if synchronicities, coincidences happen to you more frequently, so you move more steadily towards your goal. We're going to pick up on this. And now we're getting to some of the really exciting bits of this training. Stuff that really excites me is we're going to teach you how to get to the next level of human existence. But again, before we get there, let's just quickly recap the last session. So the last session, we talked about don't get stuck in society's rules. We talked about why it's important to choose a mission over a career, because missions mobilize you in a completely different way. We spoke about why it's important to create a balanced, extraordinary life. We learned to reframe failure, and we learned about why we don't have to be we should be unrealistic in our goals. Now, the missing piece is intuition. Intuition is that ability that we all have as human beings to tap into information or knowledge outside our physical senses. Now, we don't really know how intuition works, but we know that it can be really powerful. And when you learn to bring in discipline, to have a vision of the future, so boom, you're in that flow state, intuition gets activated. And it's not just that coincidences seem to happen. It's not just that the universe has your back. It's as if you have this radar in your head guiding you on what to do, so you take the right steps more often. I want to tell you my story of how I stumbled upon this. So shortly after I graduated, I went through a rocky time. I got fired from 2 jobs. I tried to start 2 little companies, and both of them failed. One was in New York, one was in San Fran. And so, I found myself in April 2001 in the city of San Francisco. The dot-com bubble had burst, and I had lost $30,000 worth of my savings. I was basically broke. Worse, I got into a car accident, and I didn't have insurance because I couldn't afford it. So I owed $6,000 for the other person's car. So I was blasting my resume to every job on Craigslist, hoping to get hired anyway. And finally, I got an offer, and it was for a job where I was selling technology to law firms. I had to pick up the phone, call a law firm, and get this lawyer to buy the company's software. Now, the economy was so bad in April 2001 because the bubble had burst, and then worse, September 11 happened that further depressed the economy, that the company I was working for, they got so many applicants, they decided, we don't have to pay you a salary. So if you can close for us, you get a commission. If not, no base salary. No insurance, no healthcare, no base salary. That's how tough it was. And there were weeks when I wouldn't close a single sale, and so I got paid zero. We knew it was getting depressing when our boss caught one of our co-workers. He hadn't closed the sale in 4 weeks, and he got evicted, couldn't afford rent. He got caught sleeping under the desk in the office. He basically was camping out in the office because he had no place else to go. He had to shower probably at the YMCA or something. He was fired. It was a brutal time shortly after September 11 in America. And it was tough. Now, sometimes when we go through those moments that we're feeling so down, we feel we need to learn something new, get to the next stage of our evolution. That's what happened to me. So I flew down to LA to take a very obscure class in intuition. And I don't know what drew me to it. I was Googling personal growth, growing to the next level, came across an advertisement for this class. So I flew to LA to take the class. And it was a class by the late Jose Silva. He was the founder of the Silva mind control system. Now, That class is no longer being offered from what I know. It was like a renegade offshoot of his original thing. Jose had passed away and various teachers and instructors had created their own classes. This particular one focused on some techniques that Jose had created on intuition before he passed away. So I took the class and it was wonderful. I was the only person who showed up because it wasn't that popular. But the results were dramatic, and at that class I had these really profound glimpses of intuition. I remember one moment the instructor would give me the name, age, gender, and location of various people, cards that she had. I didn't know these people. And I would go into my state, my meditation state, and I would see them. I saw, for example, this old lady. I only knew her name, age, gender, location. I could see her home. Outside the home, I saw Wellingtons, little boots that fishermen wear when they're wading into a river. And I described this. I described the cat. Turned out she had a cat. Turned out her husband was a fisherman. And this really blew me away that I was getting these incredible hits. Now, the best was yet to come. I flew back to my job in San Francisco, and in our job, see, we had to go to the San Francisco Library, check out the Yellow Pages. I was given the territory of San Antonio, so I'd look at the San Antonio Yellow Pages, and I would have to call every lawyer, law firm from A to Z in order. Now, everyone else was doing that, and I was doing it too. But I decided to now start using my intuition. I'd learned about how, when we listen to our gut, amazing things happen. So I would take my finger, roll it down the phone booth, and I would try to feel if I had a hunch or a feeling towards calling a particular lawyer or not calling a lawyer. Now, we would call up 100 lawyers. Maybe 90 would tell us that they're too busy to talk to us. 10 would entertain us. Out of 10, 1 would buy. That's how the game worked. Now, I found that when I started calling the lawyers that I felt an impulse for, the buy rate was significantly higher. More and more of these lawyers would give me their time. More would buy. I also seemed to have a more intuitive feel as to what to say and what to tell them and how to serve them. And I learned a technique from Jose Silva. He said, whatever you're asking for, it must be best for everyone concerned. So I wasn't programming my mind to help me close these lawyers. I was programming my mind to help me and the law firm come to the fastest and best possible resolution on whether the software was going to help their business so that our business could grow and their business could grow. And my hit rate went through the roof. In just 4 months, May 2002 to September 2002, I got promoted 3 times. I got so good at my job that they made me director of sales. On September 11, 2002, my boss sent me to New York to start the New York office of the company. We picked September 11, 2002 because it was the first anniversary of September 11. And we wanted to honor New York by starting an office there and creating more jobs. But this instinct for intuition continued growing. We then, at this point, were negotiating a contract with Google to put advertising on Google. Google had just launched their advertising model, AdWords, back in 2002. But back then, you couldn't just go and buy an ad. You had to commit to $500,000 worth of a contract to get on Google. We didn't have that money because my company was a startup. So my boss tried haggling with Google. He didn't get anywhere. I asked him if I could try. It wasn't even my job. I got on the phone with Google, and before that, I used a technique I learned to intuitively connect with the Google rep, to imagine as if I could see her, and to negotiate with her on a solution that would be best for everyone concerned. I got it down to 100,000, completely affordable. I told my boss, he was excited, and he says, well, can you try to get it down further? So I said, sure, I'll try. Again, I went back. I imagined the rep. I spoke to her. I negotiated it in my mind, coming down to something even more reasonable. And finally, I got her to agree to 60 grand. I went back to my boss and he asked me, how did you do this? I'm a trained negotiator. You're just a 26-year-old kid. How? And I told him, well, it's this thing called ESP. And he goes, oh, that's bullshit. That doesn't exist. But whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And that's really how my career took off. About 18 months later, my intuition gave me another calling, and that was to quit my job and start a company called Mindvalley. I followed that, and this is where I am now. So today we're going to talk about intuition, and I'm going to teach you 3 techniques to get you to using your intuition on a daily basis. But before we get to the techniques, as usual, as part of consciousness engineering, I first have to give you new models of reality, new beliefs about intuition that will help make this work for you. You see, the funny thing about intuition is when you believe it's real, it becomes real. But there's so much unnecessary skepticism about it, and people will tell you that you're crazy or woo-woo. You got to know how to deal with that. So we're going to go into the science and what modern researchers are discovering about intuition. We're going to look into why is it that there are these million-dollar psychic challenges and no one seems to be winning them. Does that debunk psychics? We're going to talk about all of that, and then we're going to get to the techniques. I came across this article that really blew me away. It was called, Can This Black Box See into the Future? So the black box that they're talking about is a random number generator. And this is a computer device that creates a random number. And if everything is normal, the number is within a certain deviation. Now, what they found when they were looking at this box is that at specific moments in history, the box would generate a weird pattern of numbers. Now, these moments, these weird patterns, always correlated with a situation where something happened, where a large chunk of humanity was focused on it. It's as if humanity's focus on something seemed to create a ripple in space-time or in whatever was influencing this random number generator and creating some sort of field that influenced the numbers. The one such deviation happened during the time Princess Diana lost her life in a car crash. That devastated millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world. The box would also deviate every year during the Super Bowl when hundreds of millions of Americans were focused on their television sets. So Dr. Roger Nelson, who is a director at Princeton University, said this is earth-shattering stuff. They couldn't understand how this works. Dick Bierman of the University of Amsterdam said, very often paranormal phenomena evaporate if you study them for long enough. But this is not happening with the Global Consciousness Project. That was the name of the project. The effect is real. The only dispute is what it means. But all of this seems to show that there is some sort of field around us, around life, around consciousness. We don't know what it is, but this could be the source of intuitive hunches. Now, another experiment that I found very interesting is by Cleve Baxter. Cleve Baxter was a famous lie detector expert living in New York, who was famous because he could tell if you were lying from looking at the readings on a lie detector after he would hook you up to test your stress levels. Now, one night, Cleve was in his office, and being a bored scientist, he decided, well, what will happen if I take my lie detector and I hook it up to a plant? And he found that, well, absolutely nothing happened. So he thought, well, lie detectors work because you got to create stress. Now, what would happen if I burned a leaf in the plant? So he took out his lighter, attempted to set fire to a leaf, and sure enough, the lie detector went crazy. But here's the crazy thing, right? Cleve found that the lie detector started going erratic, not when he burned the leaf, but as he was thinking about burning the leaf. He repeated the experiment, and he found it to be consistent. He wouldn't have to actually burn the leaf. He would simply have to think about abusing the plant in some way, and the plant would seem to know and generate stress. Now, he decided this tossed him into a whole new field of study. He wrote a book on it called Primary Perception. Other things he discovered, for example, is that plants, okay, you could put a plant in a room, and you could bring in a researcher, and you would have the researcher take another plant and just ravage it, like strip off its leaves. Now, as the other plant is being ravaged, the plant that's hooked up to the lie detector would show a stress response. Now, here's the weird thing. The researcher who was ravaging, the plant killer, would walk out, and the stress response would disappear. When he walked back in, the plant that was under measurement would again show a stress response. It's as if the plant could sense the energy of the researcher. Now, we couldn't explain how this works, but it seemed to work. Cleve Baxter's science was kind of controversial because some scientists said they couldn't replicate it. But if it is true, it shows that there might be a unifying field that's connecting all of consciousness. Now, modern research is showing this to be even more interesting and even more true, and hinting that there could be applications about this in our life. So, this is an article that blew me away. My wife discovered this and showed it to me a couple of weeks ago. Now, it talks about how there are two systems in our brain. This was in a psychology magazine. The first, called System 1, is a quick, instinctual, and often subconscious way of operating. It's controlled by our right brain and other parts of our brain that have been around since prehistoric times, known as the limbic and reptilian parts of the brain. Now, System 2 is a slower, more analytical and conscious way of operating. It's controlled by our left brain and by newer parts of our brain. So, scientists wanted to see, in a card game, which system would help us make better decisions, right? Which was it, the right brain or the left brain? So here's what they found. So they would take two decks of cards and they would have participants take part in a card game. Now, one deck was rigged to make the participant lose more often. The other deck was rigged to make the participant win more often. And as the participants continued playing the game, they discovered this. It took about 50 cards before the subject said they had a hunch about which deck was safer, and about 80 cards when they could actually explain the difference between two decks. This means after 50 to 80 cards, you could see a pattern. You could see that, deck B was causing you to lose more often. Deck A was causing you to win. But here's the weird bit, right? The participants were also having their sweat glands on their palms measured. Obviously, when we go through stress, our sweat glands in our palm get more active. Now, what the researchers found is that the sweat glands, this is non-conscious, we aren't aware this is happening, would show a reaction after only 10 cards. Now, what controls those glands? The right brain, the part one of our brain, system one. And it seems as if this is what is generating intuition. But consciously, the participants were not aware of it. So could it be that our brain is silently processing information or silently remembering information? Yes, the Cleve-Baxter idea of a unified field could be one, but it can also be that there's a silent part of our brain that remembers everything, that analyzes things. It isn't the left brain. It isn't what we think we are experiencing logically, but it was able to, within 10 cards, that's a fraction of the amount of time it would logically take us to help us figure out which deck was the losing deck. That was fascinating. Now, it was around the 10 card that subjects, they noticed, would start favoring the safer deck without being consciously aware. So in other words, before the analytical brain could explain what was going on, the subject's body intuitively knew that there was danger and guided them towards safety. Remarkable, isn't it? So that still kind of makes it sound as if intuition is simply a background processing. Some part of your brain was processing the cards and within 10 cards, without you consciously knowing, had already decided that one deck was safer. Here's where the experiments get really bizarre. Now, in another experiment, they put pictures behind a curtain. Some pictures were beautiful pictures, horses galloping around a stream. Some were stressful pictures, a tank rolling around on a battlefield, or a picture of people starving in a community somewhere in the world. So stressful pictures and then peaceful pictures. Now, the pictures were randomly generated by a computer, and the subject simply had to click a button to record their feeling on the pictures. Now, the fact of clicking a button or whatever was actually fake. What they were really measuring was the subject's skin response. But this experiment seems to show that intuition is happening in ways that we still really can't explain and are more than just background processing of the brain. So in this experiment, a picture would be shown in one of two curtains. Okay, the picture was randomly decided upon by a computer. The curtain was randomly picked by a computer. Now, what they found is that subjects would be able to predict the correct curtain 2 to 3 seconds before the computer had even decided which curtain to use. But the subjects were not consciously predicting it. What would happen is that when they were facing a particular curtain where the picture was going to appear, they would see an increase in some type of condition in their body. It could be galvanic skin response, where their skin stress levels go up a bit, or it could be something where the sweat glands on their palms enlarge. So it's stuff that's unconscious, but somehow human bodies, were able to, before an image is shown, know where that image was going to be shown. Now, in another variation of this exercise, two different types of images were shown. One was a peaceful image, a bubbling brook or a mountain. Another one was a stressful image, like a tank rolling over a battlefield, or a dead animal, or people starving. Now, what they found is that before the stressful image was shown, in fact, 2 to 3 seconds before the stressful image was shown, the participants' stress levels in their body, as measured through galvanic skin response or pore enlargement in their palms, would go up. And this is what baffled researchers, because how could our bodies know that's what was going to be shown in the future? You see, the computers hadn't even predicted, the algorithms hadn't kicked in, they hadn't decided what image was about to be shown. Yet, our bodies would show that stress. That's probably one of the most mysterious aspects of intuition. But either way, can we use it? And the answer is yes. In a famous study by the NIH, the National Institute of Health, what they found is that car buyers who had plenty of time to pore over all the information about their purchase were found to be satisfied with the purchase of their car maybe 25% of the time. But those who made a quick intuitive decision on their car purchase were satisfied 60% of the time. Does this mean that an intuitive decision often gets us to the right answer better than poring over tons of logical data? Can't really conclude that. It could be that doing so much research simply opened you up to more types of cars. But either way, it shows that often going with a gut response, making a quick decision, helps us get better results. This is why if you're doing the 3 most important questions, if you do that exercise online, I ask you to use a timer and to give yourself no more than 1 to 3 minutes to list down your list of experiences, the ways you want to grow, the ways you want to contribute to the world. Often, going straight from a gut response can get you pretty good results. So there's mass amounts of information now on intuition. The Ganzfeld test experiments at the University of Edinburgh, what they found is that when participants were given around 4 images to pick, okay, so they would put people in 2 rooms. One would lie down in a relaxation chamber, be really relaxed. They were called the receivers. Senders were in a different room. Senders were shown 1 of 4 different images: a mountain, an ocean, a fish, a horse. And they would then have to imagine they could send the image to the receiver who's in a dreamlike state. The receiver was then woken up and asked to pick the image that they thought the sender was sending them. Now, statistically speaking, you should pick the image correctly 25% of the time, 1 out of 4. Yet, in reality, the correct images were picked 33% of the time. The odds of that happening, billion to 1. You shouldn't get those results. So, the Ganzfeld test experiments further shows that there might be some sort of link between human beings. Then there's J.B. Ryan at Duke University, his famous experiments, the pre-sentiment test at the University of Nevada, executive ESP studies by John Michalowski. This one was interesting. John Michalowski at the Newark College of Engineering tested CEOs on intuition. And then he looked at the revenue growth and profitability of their companies. So based on testing CEOs on intuition, he could put CEOs into different boxes: highly intuitive, no intuition, and he also found that there were CEOs that were counterintuitive. They seemed to make the wrong decision, guess the wrong card, more wrongly so than probability would predict. Now, surprisingly enough, there was a total correlation with profitability of their companies. The CEOs that were proven to be most intuitive in these card tests had the highest profitable, highest growth companies. Then there was meta-analysis by Dean Radin. So Dean Radin looked at over hundreds of experiments in the book The Conscious Universe and concluded that intuition is real. Now, it's not a situation where it's so real, it's so powerful that a psychic can pass one of those $1 million psychic challenges and tell you exactly where that buried check is. You've all seen those on television. Because as we can tell from the Edinburgh studies, you're not going from 25% to 100%, you're going from 25% to maybe 33%. But think about life, right? If you could boost your odds of picking the right stock by just 5 or 10%, that is a huge edge over everyone else. If you could make better decisions in business, just 5 to 10% more, that is going to help you grow your business. So it's not accurate enough where you can always know what is consistently right, but it sure as heck can help you make better decisions more often and give you an edge over everything else. To be successful in the stock market, for example, you don't have to be correct 100% of the time. You need to be correct 55% of the time. Intuition can get you there. Now, the other reason we know intuition is real is because of personal evidence. Sometimes you can't test these things in a lab. So Michael Schmicker, who is a journalist I was in contact with once, put out a call for stories on intuition. He wrote a book about it by J.B. Ryan's daughter, Sally Ryan. And they received thousands upon thousands of stories. On Mindvalley's blog, Finer Minds, we did a similar call. Tell us about your stories of intuition. 800 Mindvalley subscribers wrote back with incredible stories of intuition. So the skepticism, not real. Skepticism is still there. But if you are skeptical, because there are a lot of people who are going to say this is woo-woo, here's what you need to know. There are 4 stages of ideas going mainstream. Step 1, skeptics proclaim it's impossible. Step 2, skeptics proclaim it's possible, but that it's too weak or uninteresting. That's where intuition is right now. Possible, but too weak or uninteresting. Stage 3, mainstream realizes it's not only important, but it's more powerful than we ever imagined. And step 4, mass acceptance. No one remembers that it was once dangerous heresy. That is what is about to happen with intuition. We're in step 2, getting on to step 3. And my job, Mindvalley's job, I want to get this from step 2 to step 3. Mainstream realizes that not only is it important, but it's more powerful than we imagine. Because as a CEO, as a business owner, as a husband, as a parent, I've been using my intuition every single day. And it's one of the best things I've ever discovered since that class in LA all the way back in 2002. Can we explain how intuition works? No, we can't. Think about this, though. For 40,000 years, humanity has used the sun for heat, for light, for warmth, for time, for farming, for navigation. Yet, no one could tell what the sun was. The ancient Egyptians thought it was the god Ra in his chariot across the sky. Other ancient cultures thought it was a giant fireball or the eye of God. It's only recently, in the last 100 years, that we figured out the sun is a giant thermonucleic reaction in the sky. It's a star. But that didn't stop us from using it for the past 4,000, 40,000 years of human existence. So we don't need to know what intuition is to prevent ourselves from using it. It's real, it works, and it's powerful. And there are numerous books out there I'd recommend that attempt to explain it, that share the evidence. If you are interested in learning more about intuition, do check out these books. My favorites are Best Evidence, The Holographic Universe, and The Field. Psychic Warrior and Conscious Universe are more like textbooks. They're very academic, very scientific, not as interesting, but Holographic Universe would be the #1 book I recommend, followed by Best Evidence, followed by The Field by Lynn McTaggart. So here's how intuition has helped me, right? When you start listening to your intuition, it often guides you in the right direction. When I was 19 years old, I was really into martial arts. That's a picture of me in my taekwondo outfit when I was like 21 or so. I really love martial arts. And I had a dream to take part in the US Open Martial Arts Championships. So the US Open Martial Arts Championships is this big event for taekwondo, which is the art I studied. Teams from all around the world come together to spar with each other, to perform freestyle martial arts, to win awards. And it's very competitive. Olympians take part in it. My dream was to someday participate. Now, my dojo, my martial arts school, was having a competition. And so they were picking the best fighters from my school to compete in a tournament with other schools. And what we had to do was we had to come up, an instructor would face us, 3 instructors actually, holding boards of wood. And we had to, using 3 different types of kicks, break each of these 2-inch thick blocks of wood. I've been visualizing this for 1 year. Visualizing myself winning a competition, getting it to the highest levels, getting to the US Open. And now I came up here, and I just knew I was going to win. So I faced the piece of wood, and I let out my first kick. And it hit it. Nothing happened. I kicked the second piece of wood. Nothing happened. The third piece of wood, total wipeout. Not a single piece of wood cracked. And I was so disappointed. I never even made it to the competition. Now what happened next is the competition came up, and I wasn't qualified, but my intuition told me to go and sit in the bleachers and just be there to support my team. So I thought, okay, well, that seems reasonable enough. I'll go do that. So I had this calling to go, even though I was embarrassed because I completely bombed. I showed up anyway. I was sitting there. And what happened was one of the participants who was competing, his name was Daniel, he was a friend of mine, he injured his leg slightly. And coming up next, so he had injured his leg in the sparring competition. Coming up next was the board breaking one, where you got to break these pieces of wood. And Daniel came up to me and said, Vishen, look, I don't want to, I may have had a hairline fracture. I don't want this to get any worse. Could you just put on your costume? I hope you packed it. Just put on your costume and come and just represent. You don't have to break anything, just so, you know, our school has a representative when they call out our school's name. So I thought, okay, I'd do it. I went up there. Again, I packed my costume, following my intuition. I wasn't meant to be there. And what was weird is, I never qualified. I went there, and when I let out my kicks, every single one broke a board. And then the timer went off and the scores came on the board. And I had broken all 3 pieces of wood in 53 seconds. It was the record for that competition. I don't even know how I did it, but I won a gold medal. And the next thing you know is I qualified to compete in the US Open Taekwondo Championships. And so I found myself in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center in a competition that was my absolute dream, but it never would have happened if I hadn't followed my intuition to be at the right place at the right time to let this happen. So now we're going to get to using intuition as parents in our business, in our lives, to solve problems and be more creative. There are 5 different ways we use intuition in the world today. And I'm going to explain these 5 ways from the warning system, connection, inspirational, support, and higher purpose. So you can see the various uses of your intuitive mechanism in your world. The first is a warning system. Intuition often serves to warn us when we are in imminent danger. One of the things that is most interesting is that often if you look at tragedies before September 11, before the Titanic sank, there was a large number of people who had an intuitive impulse to not go to work or to not board that ship. I had something like this happen to me once. I was driving down a highway and this song by the Black Eyed Peas came on the radio, and it was My Humps by Fergie and the Black Eyed Peas, and it had this funny little lyric, my humps, my dirty little humps. If you've heard the song, you know what I mean. And I was listening to the song going, by God, those lyrics are so freaking weird, but the beat is so good. And I was obsessed trying to make sense of the lyrics. All of a sudden, I heard this voice in my head saying, pay attention to the road. And it was really weird because, I wasn't not concentrating on the road, but I decided to just focus on the road for a moment. All of a sudden, on my right, a truck rear-ended a car on the right lane next to me. That car flipped in the air and landed directly in front of me. And I had just enough time to brake to avoid a collision. And that's how important intuition can be as a warning system. Perhaps you've had something like this happen to you. It's hard to just turn it on, but as you start practicing intuition, you start having these warning systems happen often. Sometimes the warning system for me is I'm on a plane, right? And when you're on a plane, sometimes you're scrolling through the television screen at the back of the seat to figure out which movie you're going to invest the next 2 hours of your life on. Sometimes the warning system simply tells me not to watch a particular movie because it's going to suck and eat up 2 hours of my time. So the more you practice, the better you get. But it's really useful to have this warning system. Second, connection. There are numerous stories of moms who could feel what their kids were feeling or would sense danger. Intuition creates a really good bridge between human beings. When I was selling technology to lawyers, I could close lawyers so well because my intuition gave me a better sense of connection. And it wasn't closing people as in manipulating them, it was closing them as in knowing what their needs genuinely were and being able to understand the challenges they were facing as a business owner so I could recommend my solution to them in a way where they felt I got them. So connection is a really important aspect. Then there's inspiration. There are so many instances where intuition leads to sparks of inspiration. The famous author Richard Bach, who wrote the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull, he was stuck at that final chapter. Jonathan Livingston Seagull went on to become one of the best-selling books in history. Time magazine put that book on its cover. It was that good. But Richard Bach, the writer, was stuck on the final chapter. And in an interview with Harper's Bazaar, he said that the final chapter came to him after he attended a class on intuition. It was a class, not the same one I attended, but by the same creator, Jose Silva. Jose Silva's work in intuition is legendary. So Jonathan Livingston Seagull, a book that made the cover of Time magazine, sparked by intuition. At the same time, many famous musicians, Robbie Williams, who wrote many incredible songs, said that his favorite song of all time, Better Man, came to him while he was vacationing in France. And it came to him through an image he had of the ghost of John Lennon. Now, I don't believe in ghost in the traditional sense. Maybe it was Robbie's intuition, but either way, a remarkable song, a beautiful song if you've heard it, Better Man, came to him through intuition. Then there's intuition as a support mechanism. Often when I'm at work and I'm moving towards a goal or trying to figure out how to do a particular project or get something out to market, I just kind of feel a nudge in terms of the right direction to move. That's your intuitive support system. It's intuition nudging you to get you to your mission or that which you want to create faster. And then there's intuition that guides you to a higher purpose. So you're going to learn this more in the next session when we talk about altering reality, right? Bending reality. But when you hit a particular aspect of your ability to alter the world around you, you start realizing that it's best to move towards a higher purpose than to randomly pick goals. So rather than create through intention, you create because you feel a calling. You feel a calling to do something to move humanity in a different direction. We'll be talking about those feelings in later chapters, but intuition is what gives you that calling and gives you that direction in which to move. Napoleon Hill said it best in his book, Think and Grow Rich. A genius is a man who has discovered how to increase the intensity of thought to a point where he can freely communicate with sources of knowledge not freely available through ordinary rates of thought. Back then, when this book was written in the 1920s or 30s, intuition wasn't widely spoken about. So Napoleon Hill used terminology such as vibes, right? But still, intuition, even him, found it to be real. And the funny thing about this book, Think and Grow Rich, is that Napoleon Hill didn't randomly write a book. Story has it he was commissioned by the richest man in America of that time, Andrew Carnegie. And Napoleon Hill interviewed Carnegie and other billionaires and inventors like Henry Ford to figure out what made them tick. And this was one of his conclusions. Those geniuses of America of that time discovered how to increase the intensity of thought to a point where they can freely communicate with sources of knowledge not available through ordinary rate of thought. Therefore, hunches, insights, lucky breaks, coincidences can all be engineered. The first step, knowing what you want. So, a lot of people think that intuition just comes to you. It does, but you got to give it a guiding mechanism. This is why being in the state of flow is so important. When you're in the state of flow, you're happy, right? Sonia Choquette, who's one of the greatest intuition teachers of all time, says, you got to be happy. I've seen her come to Mind Valley events and teach people intuition. She makes people get off their seat and dance because when you're in a joyous state, intuition kicks in. So here's how it relates to flow. When you're in flow, you're happy in the now, but you have a vision of that future. You know what you want. Because you know what you want and you're happy, intuition flows. It's as if because you know where you want, intuition knows the type of information to guide you with. So most people, this is how they plan. They think about, how to get to a particular goal, when they want to get there, why they want it, and what is it that they want. So they look at where they are right now. So let's say you run a business, you're doing about $1 million a year. You look at where you are right now. Last year you were doing maybe 900K. So you assume, okay, maybe safely I'll grow to 1.1 million next year. How do I do that? Now the problem with that type of goal is that you're looking at where you are right now and assuming straightforward logical steps. Most people who practice intuition advise flipping this around. You don't start with the how. Don't worry about the how. Instead, think about the what. Think about what is it that you want. So maybe you want to double your business, 2 million. You don't have to know how to get there. Don't worry about the how. When you think about what you want and why you want it, and then go on to when and how, your intuition starts helping you. So one of the first ways to activating intuition is knowing what you want and why you want it. You must ask what and why, not how and when. You change the question. When you're thinking about goals, you don't think about how you want to be fitter. You think about that body you want and why you want it. And then, through intuition, through thinking about it, you come up with the how and when. That's how breakthrough innovators think. Now, Jose Silva offers another tip for this. When you're thinking about the what and why, okay, his tip is on the why. He says he found that we tend to activate our intuition more, we tend to manifest more when the why involves more than one person. So if you're thinking about how to get fit, you don't just think about what type of body you want, what type of feelings you want in that body, but you think about why you want it. Maybe it's because you're going to have grandkids someday. And when you're 75 years old, you want to be able to play ball with your grandchildren. They benefit, you benefit, double win. That's how you activate intuition. Even entrepreneurs like Michael Gerber, who wrote that famous book, The E-Myth, said, don't ask how, ask what. So get out of the house. So intuition is more than just a logical process. It Some people have been able to turn it on in really magnificent ways. One of those people is Esther Hicks. She's a famous channeler who wrote the incredible Abraham Hicks books, which sparked the movie The Secret. Esther Hicks channeled her books, and if you read about how she did it, it was very, 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 very interesting. But this is a quote from one of their books. So this is a channeled quote on intuition. In other words, the quote, Esther didn't logically write it down. It came to her as a download, and it goes like this. Why you want something defines the essence of that what you want. And the universe always delivers to you the vibrational essence of your desire. So when you think about why you want something, you usually soften resistance. But when you think about when it will come to you, or how it will come to you, or who will help you, you add resistance, especially if you do not already know the answers to your questions. So Esther says that we are powerful manifesting beings. Think about what you want and then why you want it. And when you do that, the universe helps you get there faster. And how does the universe help you get there? Through intuitive nudges, through pushing you in that right direction. So, powerful stuff. Intuition is something I believe we need to be teaching our kids. 2 quick lessons here on how you could bring intuition into parenting. The first actually came to me from Laura Silva. She's the daughter of Jose Silva. And Laura was telling me about how her father, Jose, before he died, when she was a young girl, he would, as they were waiting for an elevator in anywhere they were, and they were living in Laredo, Texas, he would ask her as a child to guess, which elevator do you think is going to open first, right? Just those little games with kids. Now, I train my kid on intuition in another way, and you can try doing this too. Every now and then, when his mom is traveling on a business trip and I'm putting him to bed, I'd ask him, all right, before you go to bed, Hayden, connect with your mom with your heart and try to sense, how is she feeling? How do you think mama's feeling? And he goes, oh, mama's asleep right now. Oh, mama's feeling tired. And it's just a little game, but it's teaching kids to start connecting with their heart, to start listening to their intuition. And he's a scientifically minded kid, so when I had to explain to him what I meant by connecting with his heart, I brought up that scene from The Empire Strikes Back, because he's a big Star Wars fan, where Luke is hanging below a building in Cloud City, calling for his sister, Princess Leia, to turn the Millennium Falcon around and come and pick him up before he loses strength and falls down. So you can use ideas from pop culture, whether it's Harry Potter or Star Wars, to help kids understand this idea that you can often connect and feel information that you cannot see with your eyes. Now let's talk about intuition at work before we actually get to the techniques. I've spent some decent time with Richard Branson. Maybe together as men we've had maybe 3 hours of one-on-one conversation. I've asked him about intuition, about God, about whether he believed in the law of attraction. He said, I've never given it much thought. But he also said that by asking those questions, I gave him something to think about. But I believe that Richard was unconsciously competent. So there are entrepreneurs who are consciously competent. They know what they're doing, and they can teach other people. Richard is brilliant. Like, the man is a legend. He started 8 companies in 8 different industries and taken all 8 of them to $1 billion plus in valuation. But he may not know how he's doing it. But in one of our conversations, he did say this. We asked him, you have 300 business partners. How do you know who to trust or who to choose as your business partner? He said, well, I make up my mind about whether I can trust someone within 60 seconds of meeting them. He said specifically, shaking their hand. I found that really interesting. That could be his sense of intuition. Then there is this man, Steve Jobs. In his biography by Walter Isaacson, Isaacson said this about Jobs. Throughout his life, he would seek to follow basic precepts of Eastern religion, such as the emphasis on experiential prana, wisdom or cognitive understanding that is intuitively experienced through concentration of the mind. And Jobs said this when he is talking about how he creates ideas. He says, your mind slows down. You see a tremendous expanse in the moment. You see so much more than you could see before. It's a discipline you have to practice. I believe Jobs was one of the most intuitive men who lived. He certainly believed in intuition. He believed in the ability of the mind to forge reality. How do we know he believed in it? Well, when he died, Walter Isaacson asked Jobs if he could get a glimpse at Jobs' iPad to see what books Jobs was reading. Jobs was about to take a vacation to his favorite resort in Hawaii. There was only one book on his iPad, and that book was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. That's a book about the idea that the human being is so much more, that we are intuitive beings and that we have the ability to forge reality with our minds as we practice advanced practices such as Kriya Yoga for transforming our mind. Was he smart? Isaacson asked. Not exceptionally. Instead, he was a genius. His imaginative leaps were instinctive, unexpected, and at times magical. He was indeed an example of what the mathematician Mark Kac called a magician genius, someone whose insights came out of the blue and required intuition more than mere mental processing power. That was Steve Jobs for you. And if you go through his quotes, his speeches, intuition comes up often, such as this one. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Steve Jobs did some major things. You can too. Intuition lets you take the step towards being unrealistic because you no longer have to worry about how to get there. You just have to worry about what and why. And you know that there are other mechanisms you can draw upon to get you to the how, to help you figure out how to get there. So as you're going through life and you're setting goals, remember this quote by Joe Vitale. A good goal has to scare you a little, be unrealistic, and it also has to excite you a lot. When you are in that state of flow and you have a vision of the future that scares you a little, that's good. Because if it didn't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. But it has to excite you a lot and put you in that happy state, because that state helps bring up that intuition. Having scary goals and an excitement towards them is one of the surest ways to activate intuition in your life. All great CEOs, it's now scientifically studied thanks to John Mihalarsky, show intuition. And so I really hope that you get better at using this in your life. And now let's get to the juicy bits, to the bits on techniques for applying intuition. So these techniques are really easy. Practicing them is what will take some discipline. The first technique comes from Sonia Choquette. It's called clearing the garbage. So Sonia Choquette, who's a Mindvalley author, said, "The mind speaks, but intuition listens." Sonia's written some 20 plus books on the topic. She's probably the most prolific writer on intuition today. Now here's what she means by the mind speaks and intuition listens. In this particular technique called clearing the garbage, you're going to let your mind speak first when you're trying to solve a problem, and then you're going to let your intuition speak. Now it works like this. Let's say you're trying to make a decision, and that decision is, should I buy this stock? You start by doing it this way. My mind says dash. My mind says dash. So you repeat this around 3 times. My mind says, then just say the first thought that comes to you. So you tell yourself verbally, my mind says buy. No, my mind says buy Wednesday. No, my mind says, God, that Wall Street Journal article on this was really good. Then you ask yourself, I'm afraid that she's going to be upset with me. I'm afraid that I should really be putting this money into giving my family that trip to Disneyland. I'm afraid that the stock is going to drop. Now, what are you doing here? You're letting your mind speak. Remember what Sonia said, right? The mind speaks, intuition listens. Now, at this point, after you do it, you come to present. Sonia says, gaze at your keyboard, or just look at your hands, or just feel the chair you're sitting on. Become present. Now, tell yourself, my spirit says, and then say the first thing that comes to mind. My spirit says, buy it next week. My spirit says, don't buy this stock, wait 2 days and you'll have a better idea. My spirit says, buy now. So as you do this exercise, you let your mind speak, you let your fears speak, then you come to present and you let your spirit speak. You see, intuition works really well when it's spontaneous. Jose Silva said it often feels like guessing. It feels like you're playing a guessing game, but the guesses just happen to be right. So by doing this exercise, by saying it really rapidly, don't go, my mind says, and then think. My mind says, and say the first thing that comes to mind. You start making proper, correct guesses. My mind says, I'm afraid that, come to present, then ask yourself, my spirit says, and the first thing that you feel, say it, okay? So this is how you do the exercise. Now, I'm thinking about buying a car. So I'm going to do this exercise right now with you so you can see me do it. Now, the car I want to buy is a mini SUV because we've got 2 kids, and I'm thinking about a particular brand of car. My mind says buy the blue one. My mind says maybe black. My mind says look at the BMW SUV. Okay, now I'm going to go to the fears. I'm afraid that in this market, it doesn't make sense. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to sell my existing car in time. I'm afraid that it's going to be impossible for my wife to park it. Now I come to present. So I'm just going to look around me, feel the keyboard, listen to the sounds around me, maybe try to feel the air. I'm staring at a bird outside the window. I'm present, except I'm talking to you. Now I'm going to go on. My spirit says it's the best car at this time. My spirit says the black version is the best. My spirit says the child seat is going to fit in there perfectly. Wow, that was easy. I now feel so much comfortable buying that car. So that's how you do the exercise. Try doing it. And the thing about intuition is the more you do this, the better it gets. It gets better and more consistent and more powerful as you do it more. But now let's go to an advanced technique. It's called the invisible counselor technique, and it comes from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. So invisible counselors are basically imaginary people you create in your mind to help your intuition speak. Now, many people believe in guides. We believe that we are watched upon by angels or guides, and that's great. That's a great belief. It is, whether it's true or not is irrelevant. As you learn in consciousness engineering, if you believe something that empowers you, by all means do it. So if you believe in angels or guides, and you believe that there's an angel around you, great, you're already there. Napoleon Hill suggests a technique called the imaginary counselor technique. Now what you do is, you imagine as if you have your own private boardroom of advisors, and you can bring into this boardroom any person, anywhere in history that you adore. I really respect Abraham Lincoln, for example. I think he was an incredible person. And you might also want to bring on someone like Thomas Edison or Walt Disney. And by the way, I'm going to explain this really fast, but in a following chapter, we are putting up a 7-minute explainer video by Mindvalley that will explain this technique in depth. Okay? So don't worry about nailing it absolutely now. When you finish this training, you can go ahead and watch this video if you want. If you get this technique or if you already have guides, no worries. Because guides are nothing unusual. If you've studied the Silver Method, they teach you how to bring on guides. And if you did Module 2 on forgiveness, we already created guides or counselors to help you with your forgiveness exercise. So it's easy. But what happens in the boardroom technique is that you're going to create this boardroom and fill it with anywhere from 4 to 10 people whom you really respect. Now, when you are faced with a problem, you imagine yourself in this boardroom and you turn and you ask Abraham Lincoln what he thinks. And just imagine he's talking to you. Then you might turn to Thomas Edison, then turn to Walt Disney and ask him what he thinks. Napoleon Hill said the technique got so eerily good that at certain points, they would say things that he would never expect. He knew it was all his mind making it up, but he observed that they would even develop personalities on their own. Like once he said Abraham Lincoln was consistently late and got upset with another person in the room who questioned him on it. And so they had a bit of a scuffle and one of them walked out. It's weird, said Napoleon, but it often seems as if these counsels take on a mind of their own. Now, if that happens to you, don't worry, don't freak out. It's imaginary. That's why it's called imaginary counselors. But if you believe that these counsels are real and that they are your guides or something, that's okay too. Okay, so that's how you do the exercise. Now you can use any form of meditation you want, and don't worry about me going through this fast because a 7-minute explainer video is available for you. Now here's how you do it, right? You can, in your meditation, imagine you're in a beautiful space, whatever is your perfect spot that you, in your imagination, see yourself in. I like to see myself at the top of a hill. Now, tell yourself, at the count of 5, my first guide will appear. Now, you can choose your guide. You can call upon Thomas Edison or Tesla or anyone you want. Or you can simply say, at the count of 5, my first guide will appear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, when I did that, my guide was Leonardo da Vinci. But it wasn't a human Leonardo. It was a cartoon drawing of him. And he stayed as a cartoon drawing. My other guide was a giant panda. Sometimes you don't know what you get, but if you like them as they appear, go with it. So I've had guides ranging from historian figures to actors and actresses to giant marsupials, but all of them functioned as a guide. So there are two ways you use guides. Now, in the boardroom technique, you could have anywhere from 5 to 10 guides, right? And they tend to be legendary historical figures because you want to imagine these people to be advisors who can advise you on areas in life you want to improve. Business or love or health or fitness. One of my guides, for example, is Bruce Lee to advise me on health. But you can also have guides who could be a giant panda or cartoon Leonardo da Vinci. These are different category of guides that you're going to use in the third technique, which is called the Delta Doorway. So have your boardroom panel, but also have 2 or 3 trusted guides. They could be someone from your boardroom. They could be an angel. They could be a deceased grandparent or parent. These are going to be your counselors, your close counselors. And this is how you're going to use them. So the third technique on intuition relies on the idea that there are different brainwave states that we go in. When you're asleep, when you're awake, you're at the beta level. When you're in meditation or resting, you're in alpha. When you are in theta, you're in a light sleep. Your neck is often, your head is often bent. You're in theta. Theta is the domain of intuition. So often you're having an intuitive impulse. Your brain is going into theta. Now, delta is sleep. Delta is when you are unconscious, you are in sleep. It happens when you're asleep. It's hard to have waking delta. You got to be trained for that. So this particular technique called the doorway, the Delta Doorway, is a technique that I adapted from various different systems, ranging from the Biocybernetics Institute to 40 years of Zen, to my own studies, hooking myself up to EEG machines, to Jose Silva, to mystics and other practitioners I've met. It works like this. You have a problem you want to solve. So in the daytime, reflect on the problem. Feel the pain. Keep your eyes closed, but there's no need to meditate. You can keep your eyes closed and feel the pain. Now, I remember a time when I wanted to quit my job, and my boss asked me to stay, but the salary he offered me was just not enough for me and my family. So I had to decide if I should quit or stay. And I took a walk in the rain in New York, and I reflected on the problem. So again, you can do this while walking, while awake. I kept my eyes closed, felt the rain falling on me. I felt the pain of this decision. I had no idea what to do. I had no idea if I should stay with the job. It was boring and I couldn't take it. I had no idea if I should try something new because I was married. My wife was unemployed. I didn't want to put her in any risk. So you feel the pain. Now, the next thing is, you don't worry about it. You go through the rest of your day, but at night, you're going to come back to it. At night, before you go to bed, sit up in bed and feel your guides around you. With your eyes closed, you replay the problem and you feel the pain. But this time, you feel your guides around you. Now, why are your guides there, right? Well, it's because you are asking them to observe the problem and to sympathize with you and feel that pain. Now, I want you to feel the pain. But you're feeling it now because you're sharing it with your guides who care about you and want to help. So at night, I would replay that same problem. The job decision. Should I stay or should I go? Should I take the risk of trying out something on my own or should I stay with stability? Now, the next thing you do is you ask your guides to take that problem to a higher source. Higher source could be God or Jesus or whatever you believe in, or Allah or Yahweh or higher consciousness or the universe. So you ask your guides to take that problem up to a higher source as you sleep. Now, at this point, you can open your eyes, break. You can check the time. I like to take a glass of water. And you're going to then go back to the exercise. So now you close your eyes again. Now, at this time, you call upon your guides. Now, you can be meditating at this point. You can be meditating at step 2 as well. As long as you're at the bed space, you can be meditating. Call upon your guides again. See the problem resolved. And you thank them and you thank a higher power. So you see your guides again, and this time you visualize the problem resolved and you feel the feelings of it being resolved. Now remember, you look at the end goal, not the means goal. So I would feel the end goal. I have security. I'm earning the salary I want. My wife is safe. I'm safe. I have a great job. I didn't see myself at my old company or doing something on my own or doing something new. I just felt the feelings I wanted from the situation resolving itself. Call upon my guides, see the problem, I thank my guides, and I thank a higher power. And that's it. then you go straight to sleep. Now, Jose Silva, who pioneered a technique like this, he called it the mental video, and it was part of an offshoot from the Silva method. He said that why you do this before going to bed is because when you're in the delta level of mind, you're connected to higher intelligence. So when you do this before going to bed, you are bracing yourself for that connection to happen so that higher intelligence can get fed the problem and can feed you the solution. Now, Jose says, watch for the solution within 72 hours. He says the solution will come to you and you will know it's right. You will just absolutely know. It's not a feeling, it's a straight off knowing, or something might alter in the world to get you to that solution. Whenever I do this, within 72 hours, often something alters in the world to get me to that solution, and I know what I need to do. Now, in the case of this particular job situation, in 24 hours, the company I worked for, it was two business partners. And what I didn't know is that they had had a fight. And business partner A was the one asking me to stay and offering me a salary, which I thought was fairly insulting. Now, business partner B called me and said, hey, I just want to give you a tip. I'm parting ways because I'm having a fight with A. I don't think the company is going anywhere, and I really think you should try to find something else. And I was stunned, but it was the answer I needed. And so I went forth and I found something else. So I've used this, and it's always strange to me how clear the answer is, but it works. Now, Jose Silva says that, after 72 hours, if it doesn't work, don't freak out. So that's 3 days. Do it again. But don't do it every single night. Just do it, wait for 72 hours, then do it again. He says doing it every single night is like being that annoying child in the backseat of a car telling the universe, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Do it once. Give the universe a break. If 72 hours you aren't sure, do it again. But you can do this to decide whom to marry, where to go on your honeymoon, what job to take, important decisions, and it is pretty powerful how it works. So I've given you 3 different ideas for intuition, and I hope you can get started. But know that you already have intuition. In that famous article about the curtain study and the card study, it said often you can just figure this out by training yourself to be more sensitive, whether it's to the opening of the pores on your palms or to simply that inner voice. You have intuition. Start believing it's real, start practicing these 3 techniques, and it'll get better and better and better. Thank you.